The Sunday school lesson for July 14th, 2024 is Esther's bold faith. Esther chapter 3, verses 2 through 3, verses 5 through 6a, and chapter 4, verses 7 through 16. Welcome, viewers and subscribers, to my channel, The Backstory and More. I am Audrey. If you are interested in knowing what happens before each Sunday school lesson, you are at the right place, because I will share the backstory, read the lesson text, and offer a brief lesson summary. The backstory takes us to Esther chapter 2, verses 17 through 23, through chapter 3, verse 1. Esther made queen. Now the king was attracted to Esther more than to any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. And the king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his nobles and officials. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces and distributed gifts with royal liberality. Mordecai uncovers a conspiracy. When the virgins were assembled a second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. But Esther had kept secret her family background and nationality, just as Mordecai had told her to do, for she continued to follow Mordecai's instructions as she had done when he was bringing her up. During the time Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, became angry and conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. But Mordecai found out about the plot and told Queen Esther, who in turn reported it to the king, giving credit to Mordecai. And when the report was investigated and found to be true, the two officials were impaled on poles. All this was recorded in the book of the Annals in the presence of the king. After these events, King Xerxes honored Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, elevating him and giving him a seat of honor higher than that of all the other nobles. Verse 2. All the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and paid honor to Haman, for the king had commanded this concerning him. But Mordecai would not kneel down to pay him honor. Verse 3. Then the royal officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, "Why do you disobey the king's command?" Verses 5 through 6-8. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. Yet having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Chapter 4, verse 7. Mordecai told him everything that had happened to him, including the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. Verse 8. He also gave him a copy of the text of the edict for their annihilation, which had been published in Susa, to show to Esther and explain it to her. And he told him to instruct her to go into the king's presence to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. Verse 9. Hathach went back and repeated to Esther what Mordecai had said. Verses 10 through 11. Then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, all the king's officials and the people of the royal provinces know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law, that they be put to death unless the king extends the gold scepter to them and spares their lives. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king. Verses 12 through 13. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer: do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. Verse 14. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Verses 15 through 16. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai: go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa, and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. A brief summary. Mordecai likely had some sort of official role at the king's gate, making him aware of the assassination plot. Mordecai was not rewarded. The account was simply recorded in the book of the annals. Esther still had not disclosed her nationality. This was because Mordecai had commanded it, and Esther followed Mordecai's instructions. Though the king did not reward Mordecai, he honored Haman for unknown reasons. We also are not told why Mordecai would not kneel down. Perhaps it was because Haman was an Agagite, a descendant of the Amalekites, who were arch enemies of the Israelites. The date set for the Jews to be destroyed was 11 months in the future. Haman's bribe of 10,000 talents is believed to be the equivalent of 2/3 of the Persian Empire's annual income at the time. Haman, though wealthy, would likely not have had this amount of money, but expected to plunder it from the Jews and then bring it up to the royal treasury. Law that was sealed with the king's own ring could not be repealed, even by the king. Note the repetitive verbs destroy, kill, and annihilate, and the fact that even the young and old, women and children, were to be annihilated in this heinous edict. Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes, which identified one with the dead. When Esther heard about Mordecai's mourning, she sent clothes to Mordecai so that he could enter the palace to speak with her. However, he refused the clothing and instead spoke to Esther through Hathach, a eunuch. Though Esther lived in the palace, she was sequestered in the harem and had not yet learned about the king's edict to destroy the Jews. When she heard Mordecai's request, she explained that she had not been called up to the king for 30 days, which may have left her wondering whether she had his favor, a necessity if she presented herself to the king without his calling her. Anything less than the king's favor and mercy would result in death. Mordecai remained Esther, or he reminded Esther that she would not escape simply because she was in the king's house. After all, Hathach now knew that Esther was a Jew, and others would likely discover it as well. Moreover, Mordecai believed that God would deliver his people one way or another. Esther could be the person through whom he moved, or he would find another mode of deliverance for his people. Once Esther made her decision, she was determined not to go it alone, but to get all the Jews to join in on a fast for 3 days. Furthermore, she made her decision, and if I perish, I perish. Thank you so very much for watching and listening. Join me soon for the next backstory and more. Stay safe and may God bless.